Were the inclusion of summoned ashes in Elden Ring a mistake is a debate that's been going on for a long time. Today, I want to take a definitive look on the pros and cons to determine the answer to that question. But before we can do that, we first have to look at the reason that summoned ashes even exist. Ever since the first game, the Souls franchise developed this reputation of being super hard and unwelcoming to new players, and while that reputation wasn't entirely true, it did have some truth behind it. Souls has a very steep learning curve of dying multiple times to learn and progress, which doesn't make for a great new player experience. And unlike most games which teach you stuff then tell you where to go, Dark Souls 1 just kind of throws you into Firelink Shrine, which means most players will end up doing something wrong, dying a bunch, then just stop playing. This reputation became less as time went on and new Souls games came out, but it still was an issue. And a fix like making the game easier wouldn't work since it would alienate the existing fanbase. So what was FromSoft's solution? Summons. A mechanic that would help new players not get destroyed by the bosses without straight up making everything easier. For Elden Ring to become as big as it did, a mechanic like this that helps new players was absolutely needed. Okay, now that we got the basics down, let's get into the pros and cons. Pro 1, it makes the learning curve of Souls much less steep and allows new players to adjust and learn the game without getting absolutely demolished by everything. This makes the new player experience of Elden Ring much more pleasant and is one of the reasons Elden Ring had as many players as it did. Now let's get into Con 1, making the game too easy. This con splits into two, one that's actually pretty valid and one that's not. Let's go over what's valid first. Normally in games you use everything you can to your advantage, which applies to Souls 2, and is something that is expected of you in previous Souls games. But when you do the same thing in Elden Ring, summons end up making the game extremely easy for experienced players, which means for them to have a proper experience, they have to deliberately handicap themselves and not use them. Which isn't that big of an issue, but it still goes against the normal flow of things. Now let's talk about the one that's not really valid and is a bit more gatekeepy. The entire Souls reputation of being hardcore never actually went away with Elden Ring. Instead, it transformed into this elitist mentality of people playing the game wrong by using summons or even using magic. This mentality is just plain stupid. The game gave you these tools and encourages you to use them, and although they can make the game too easy, the point of the game is to have fun, and if someone is having fun using summons and magic, then that's a perfectly valid way to play. This mentality was mostly a way for people to feel superior to others and gatekeeping the game. And I'm not counting this as an actual con, but I did have to talk about how stupid this was. Pro 2, making the game more accessible. By summoning and the game being open world, it allows people that aren't that good at the game or people that don't have the time to die a bunch, experience the game and have fun with it. Accessibility opens up the Souls genre to a lot more audiences, which is a huge pro. Con 2, making the game more difficult. Now you might be thinking this makes no sense. Con 1 and Con 2 completely contradict each other, but let me explain. Certain bosses that are meant to be the peak of difficulty are designed to be difficult even with summons, like Melania or Radahn, and for them to be difficult despite summons, they either have a ton of AoE, overtuned stats, or attacks that deal insane damage. This issue is mostly felt with Melania and Radahn and makes them feel kinda unfair when fighting them without using summons. And using summons makes something like the Melania fight too easy, so you end up being damned if you do and damned if you don't. This is probably the biggest con of summons. Now let's get into the final pro. Variety. Summons add a degree of variety into the game by allowing you to play in a different way than normal. And with there being tons of summons, it adds a new layer to builds with players using different summons. And it also allows for challenges like beating the game using only summons. In an RPG game, more variety is always accepted and it is a pretty good thing. And that's it, there's no third con. And now that we've laid out the pros and cons, let's move on to the verdict. And in my opinion, while summons do end up making the game slightly worse in aspects like the difficulty, and despite me being someone that doesn't use them, I see that the pros of making the game more accessible to people far outweigh their cons, leading me to say Summon Ashes were not a mistake and were in fact a good addition to the Souls franchise. But what do you guys think? Leave your thoughts on summons in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more like this.